Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 175. Today I'm going to talk about Pandemic. As you can see, this is actually the new printing for 2013 of this edition. You've probably seen the old edition floating around. This one's starting to come out in stores, I believe. It's a game I've actually played probably at least 20 times over the last several years. So I got this one, and I played a few games of the solitaire recently, and just a little spoiler alert, that's kind of my favorite way to play this particular game. It's a great little solitaire game. You can mix up the difficulty levels, mix up the different character roles that you can take on. But I have had the chance to play this with a group of, I wouldn't necessarily call them gateway gamers, because we play a lot of different types of games. But their only experience with co-ops has been Forbidden Island. So I figured, let me bring this one out and then kind of see what they think of it and stuff like that. So I'll show you how to play it. I know there's like 1,000 videos about how to play this. I'll go ahead and walk through how to play it in case you're watching this video one day and you haven't seen how to play this game. You can watch it. Otherwise, those of you that know how to play it can go ahead and skip to the end, and I can kind of relate to you a little bit about the experience, introducing kind of new gamers to this kind of thing, and just my thoughts on the game in general. Okay, here's the board here. It looks quite a bit different than the first edition, but I just wanted to make a quick note just so people are aware. Some of the boards, and I believe there are very few of them, do not have this route here between Sao Paulo and Lagos. So I think it's very few. I mean, obviously mine is fine. But if you do get a board with this, just know that that should be there. And I believe you can contact Z-Man Games, and they've been pretty good about sending replacement boards. So just be aware of that. Okay, I've got the board set up here. All the players are going to take and put one of their pawns here in Atlanta with a research station there. And you can see you've got different colored pawns here. And you're going to take a pawn matching the role of your choice, matching the color. So there's 7 different roles in the game here, and this edition actually comes with 2 new roles that haven't been in previous editions, and you basically choose one of these. You can do them randomly or decide how to do them. Now there is a configuration that I like to use when I teach the game because it makes it a little bit easier. You can adjust the difficulty by manipulating this deck a little bit. I'll talk about that in a second, but it seems to me that having the researcher is going to make the game a lot easier, and then the medic and scientist are ones that I like to throw in, and then if we're playing 4-player, I like to go ahead and throw that in. These seem to be kind of the most straightforward roles and the easiest to accomplish the goals here. Now these other roles are really good too, but just there's a little bit more nuance to those. So after picking the roles and then setting up your pawns here in Atlanta, what you're going to do is you're going to start seeding the board with various diseases here. So there's 4 different types of diseases. They don't really have a name, but we just kind of name them, like yellow fever. You got the blue one here for flu. The black one is plague, and then maybe this is typhoid. Some crazy typhoid strain or something. So there's 4 different diseases, and they're kind of going to start off in the kind of localized regions. So the yellow ones will come out here. The blue ones will kind of come up here in North America and Europe. The black ones kind of go through Asia or the Middle East. And then, you've got the red ones over here in the Far East. Now, to seed the board with these cubes to start the game, you're going to draw cards off of this deck here. This is the Infection deck. Okay, now in this deck, you're going to have cards matching the different cities. So we've got Essen, Kinshasa, Beijing, Riyadh, Johannesburg, all these different things. So the first 3 cards that you draw, you're going to put 3 cubes in those cities. Then you're going to draw 3 more, put 2 cubes in those, and then draw 3 more, and then put 1 cube in those cities. So the object of the game is to be moving your pawns around the board, curing the diseases basically by removing the cubes, and then trying to find the cure for each of the diseases. Now you're going to win the game when you find a cure for each of the 4 diseases here, and then there's several ways to lose the game. So if you ever have 8 outbreaks, and I'll explain what an outbreak is in a minute, you keep track with this little marker here. If you ever have 8 of those, you're going to lose. If you ever go all the way through the player deck here, then you're going to lose. And then if you ever need to put a cube on the board and there's no more cubes of that color, you're going to lose. So how does a turn work? Well, on the lower right hand side of the board here, we've got a very simple little turn outline. Basically on your turn, you're going to do 4 actions, and there's a bunch of possible actions. I'll explain those in just a second. So after you take 4 actions, you're going to draw 2 cards. You're going to draw 2 cards off of the player deck here, which may trigger an epidemic. I'll talk about that in a second. And then you're going to discard down to 7 cards. You can only have 7 cards in your hand. And then you're going to draw from the Infect deck and infect the cities. So let's walk through that. So So if we take a look here, the game comes with these 4 cheat sheets here for the different actions. You got them front and back there. So the first thing you can do is you can drive or take a ferry, basically move to one connected city. That's very simple. I could take my pawn here and move there. That would be 1 action. Move again, that would be 2 actions. Remember, you have 4 actions. The next thing you can do is do a direct flight. And to do that, you discard a city card and then you move to that city. Now, depending on the number of players are going to start with some cards out of this deck here. So here's sort of a sample starting hand. So you can see in this deck, there's either going to be different city cards and they match the color of the city, or you may get an event card. There's not a whole lot of these. I think there's 5 or 6. I'll talk about these in a second. But if you wanted to, say, travel to Sao Paulo from Atlanta here, I could discard this, and then I could travel directly to that city. So the next way to move is you can do a charter flight. And this is by discarding a card of the city that you're in, and then you can move anywhere. So if I had this Atlanta card, see, we all started in Atlanta, I could discard that, then I can fly wherever I want on the board. Then the last way to move is the shuttle flight. Now the shuttle flight is basically traveling between research stations here. So Atlanta starts with one of these little wooden research stations, and then later on I'll talk about how to put more research stations out. But let's say we had here in Khartoum, I could just go move from here to here, and that would only use up 1 of my 4 actions. And speaking of research stations, this is how you build a research station. Basically, if you're in the city, let's say I was in Lagos here, if I had a card that matched that Lagos, I could discard that, and then I could build a research station there. The next thing you can do is treat a disease. So how do you treat a disease? Well, let's do an example here. Let's say I can move in here for 1 action, and then for each other action point I can remove a cube. So maybe that would be 1 to move in, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll temporarily cured the red disease from Bangkok there. So basically 1 action per cube will let you remove the disease. Now, if you find a cure for the disease, which I'll talk about in just a second, you can remove all the cubes in the city for 1 action. So if we had found the cure for red, I could take 1 action and boom, remove all 3 of those cubes. Now before we talk about discovering a cure, the next action we can do is share knowledge. So the way that you share knowledge is you basically can give or take a card in the city that you're a match that you're in. So we're all in Atlanta here to start the game. So let's say we're in here, maybe it's the orange player's turn. If he wants, he can give anybody else the Atlanta card, or if somebody else had the Atlanta card, say green had it, then on orange's turn he could take the Atlanta card as an action. So it's an action to either give this to somebody or take it from somebody. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, this is tying into how you find a cure for the disease. So the last action you can do is discover a cure. Now to do that, you need to be where there's a research station. Doesn't matter where the research station is, what color it is, as long as you're at a research station, you can cure any of the 4 different colored diseases here. And the way that you do that is you discard 5 cards of a matching color. So if I discarded 5 blue cards, then I could use that as an action. It takes an action to cure a disease. Then I could cure the blue disease. So I can take and move that down like so, and now I've cured it. So now when somebody goes to remove cubes, again, it doesn't take 1 action per cube. It's now 1 action per city, and you can remove all the cubes there. So the next sort of byproduct of that is if you've cured a disease, and then after curing it, there exists no cubes on the board. So maybe you've cured it, then you've cleaned up all the blue cubes, then you're going to eradicate it. So you're going to flip this marker over like that. So that means that you will no longer see the blue disease appear anywhere on the board. So after you've done your 4 actions, then you're going to go and you're going to draw 2 cards off the deck here. You're going to add them to your hand. You maybe get another location card. You might get an event. Now these events are interesting because you can play these at any point. They don't cost you 1 of your 4 actions. You can even play them on another player's turn. So the events do a whole variety of things. I'm not really going to go into them, but they're very helpful, they're very powerful, and it's very interesting and key to the game to knowing the right time to play certain events, where it's the most advantageous for you. Now it is possible to draw one of these epidemic cards from this deck. So the easy game, basically you shuffle up 4 of these epidemic cards, you create 4 equal stacks, shuffle 1 card in each stack, and then shuffle the deck together. Then you have sort of like a medium difficulty with 5, and then if you don't feel like winning, you can play with 6 of these. So you're going to shuffle these in. Now when you draw these count as one of the 2 cards you draw at the end of your turn, and then you're going to go through some different steps here. But before I explain how this works, let's talk about how the diseases are going to spread normally. Then I'll come back and talk about what happens with an epidemic. So after you've drawn your 2 cards here, then you're going to go to the Infect City step. So after every player's turn, you're going to spread the disease a little bit. So if we zoom in here to the infection deck, we can see there's an infection rate. Now it starts the game off here at 2. And this is the number of cards you're going to draw off the deck. So normally you'll just draw a card, you'll take a look at the city. Here's Lima, so we're just going to add a yellow cube to Lima. Then we'll draw our second card, and then we've got here Washington, D.C., and then you're going to go ahead and add a blue cube, just a single cube for these, to that respective cities. Now the thing you got to watch out for is when you get 3 cubes in a city. So if we had drawn the Bangkok card here, instead of just adding a single cube to that city, we're going to have an outbreak, because you can never have more than 3 cubes in a city. So when that happens, instead of placing this, you're going to look at all the adjacent lines here, and then you're going to outbreak that and spread that to all of the adjacent cities. So the disease is going to spread that much quicker and get that much more out of control. So you really want to watch, as these cubes pile up, you want to prevent that and prevent these outbreaks from happening. If you look here on the left-hand side of the board, you can see the outbreak track. And remember, when you hit number 8 here, the game's going to immediately end. You're going to lose the game. So anytime there's an outbreak that occurs, you're going to move this up. Now it's possible to have a chain reaction outbreak. So let's say Ho Chi Minh City here also had 3 cubes. We go to place in Bangkok, for argument's sake, it's going to trigger an outbreak. And then Ho Chi Minh City, as we go to place another cube there, that's also going to trigger an outbreak. And for each outbreak triggered, you're going to move this marker up. So it can move up maybe 2 or even 3 times, if you get a lot of cubes localized in the same area. So finally, let's talk about these epidemic cards. And these are cards you do not want to see. Now the first thing you're going to do is you're going to increase the infection rate. So this is going to eventually lead to drawing more and more cards off the infection deck there. The next thing to do here is Infect, and this is interesting because you go and draw the bottom card off of this deck. Take a look at it. So in this case we've got San Francisco here. This one you're going to add 3 cubes to, and then you put it in the discard pile like so. And then even more interesting, you're going to intensify. Now this is really cool here. So what you're going to do when you intensify is you take all the cards from the discard pile there, shuffle them up, mix them up, and then you're going to put them back on top of the deck, like so. So all of those cities that you just infected are now going to be infected again. So that's how you can get a lot of these kind of outbreaks and things like that. So you've really got to be careful. So that's the game. You're going to take 4 actions, move around the board, remove cubes, try to accumulate cards, trade cards with other players, build research stations, try to find cures at the research stations. Then you're going to draw new cards into your hand, infect the cities, and then the next player will go. And just a quick little note about these rolls here. I'm not going to get into these in too much detail, but basically each of these rolls has a neat little special ability that lets you kind of break the rules. Just a researcher, for example, she lets you trade cards even if you're not in the city that is listed on the card. You can trade Atlanta, wherever you want. The medics, he cures the diseases quicker. The scientists can discard 4 cards instead of 5 cards to find a cure. And there's a nice little variety there. And that is how you play Pandemic. Okay, hope you enjoyed the overview. Basically 2 things I have to say about this game. First of all, it's, I think, a pure, perfect example of elegance in game design. It's very, very simple, very straightforward. The way that you draw cards, and you have to deal with the card management because you want to use cards to build research stations and maybe to fly somewhere. If there's a lot of infection cubes building up, you've got a card, you want to discard it, fly over there and start working on those cubes so you prevent the outbreaks. But you don't really ever want to use the cards to do anything except for get a cure. So I like that it's just built into the elegance of the mechanics. I don't know what other word to use. I think elegant is like the perfect word for this game. I know people like to throw around elegance. Most of the time I think they're right. But this game is like, it just exudes elegance. So you've got that aspect, and the whole, like the way that you infect, it's just, I'm going to do this action, this action, this action, draw the infections, and then boom, we get an epidemic, and then poof, goes right back on top of there. And so it's just, like an explosion and sort of, the chaos and things kind of getting out of the player's control. It's very dramatic, a moment when that happens. But it's so very simple. There's not, I think the rules are like 4 pages long. I mean, I explained it to you. I know there's hundreds of videos on it already, but it's just very, very simple to play and get into. There's not a lot of barriers there. The other thing I would say is it has that issue of the players maybe dictating to other players, but to me, that is not necessarily a fault of the game itself. I think that's more of a fault of the people teaching the game and running the game. I don't ever really see how that could be the game's fault, because it is a co-op. So not only should you be cooperating to win the game, but you should be sort of cooperating and friendly with the people around you. I don't know that I've ever played this with anybody that was really a jerk about, you're going to do what I say. So then they probably wouldn't be invited back. But so I had a chance to play this with some people that hadn't played a co-op, again, except for Forbidden Island, and that was actually a while ago. I had to kind of remind them, hey, this is like by the same guy that did Forbidden Island. They're like, oh yeah, I remember how the cards would go back and stuff. So basically, they really liked it. They got into it, and they liked the theme of it. I think it's a very accessible theme. I mean, there's no like anything iffy about the theme at all, and it's sort of it has that cooperativeness to it. Like who doesn't want to cure disease or these plagues that are ravaging the planet? And so, anyway, getting back to the whole leader thing, as I was teaching the game, I'm aware of that issue in the game, of having me telling them what to do. So I kind of stepped back to that and would just say, you give them options and things. So, and I think it worked really well. So I think this is a game that, make sure you bring that next time. So definitely I'm going to do that. But as somebody that's played the game, like I said, probably 20 times, that's kind of a rough estimate. I played it a lot. I'm kind of over it. And, I play tons of games. I'm kind of, different than I think most people. So I think that this is a great game as like a gateway is not a word I usually like to use, but this is like, it's a great game to bring people in, and it's simple, and you get into all these different things. So this game is really like one of the better gateway games just in general. I mean, certain gateway games I think work better for different people. Like, that's a whole other discussion. You can have a game with some fantasy that would be a gateway for certain people that wouldn't necessarily be a gateway for others. But I think this one is more generally a good gateway game for probably a better, wider cross-section of people. If you're new to the game, I say go pick it up, and you've got definitely hours and hours and hours of learning this style of game, and this is probably the best game to do that with as far as the co-ops go. So I haven't played the expansions ever. I probably will hang on to this particular copy so I can get the reissues of the expansions as they come out, because I've played it to death. I did enjoy playing it solitaire because it takes like half an hour. Especially if you know the game, you just go, you kind of expect where things are going to happen based on how the cards come out. You can pretty well predict. You can almost kind of predict if you're going to win or lose after you kind of get into the game a bit, because there's not really a lot of variability in the deck. Now it's going to be different, but you can it kind of gets baked into the deck whether you're going to win or lose, which is whatever. It's just part of the game. But I'm going to try the expansions and see how those change things up, because I never got a chance to do that. So anyway, that's Pandemic. So those are my thoughts. And if you're new to the game, I'd say it's a definite instant buy. It is also a great price point. I believe you can pick this up for about $20 or so, 20 to 30. I can't remember exactly, but it's relatively cheap for a board game. And like I said, you're going to get hours out of it. So that's at least a movie or two. You're going to get way more hours out of this. So anyway, thanks.